So if Sydney's not where the Aussie gets active, but it's likely to be traded, is that a reflection of Sydney not necessarily actively trading it, or the fact that there's probably not a lot of turnover coming out of Sydney? Now, one of the things we're going to talk about later on this month is the data that I've organized through the Bank of International Settlements reports that come out every, I think it's 3 or 4 years. The last report I think came out in 2007, I believe. And we'll talk about that this month. I'll get into that and break that down as far as turnover and which financial centers are the most active and things like that. Right now I want to show you not just by percentages and statistics, but really by showing you the actual pip movement. So Sydney is not a super active financial center in terms of daily turnover. Why it is very important and why I watch it, and this is where the real value is for Sydney, it's the fresh look at a brand new day. It's the first look at a brand new day. That's where Sydney gets a lot of its importance from. And it's definitely why you should at least take a look at the way prices move during this time. Now when Sydney overlaps with Tokyo, you get a little bit more activity. But again, 1800 hours, right here is when, again, if you think about East Coast time, which is where I am, this is where Sydney's getting active, Tokyo's getting active, Singapore, Hong Kong. It stays relatively quiet. You see that? A little bit of volatility, but it stays relatively quiet. When do we really start to see some acceleration in the Aussie, which we've already looked at by an entire day as a fairly quiet pair to begin with, right? I'm not expecting fireworks out of this thing. I've seen its daily pip range. So when does it get active? Well, who affects this? Who seems to affect this the most? The U.S. market open, right? I'm not being U.S. centric. I'm just looking at the data. When we get the U.S. market active, that aspect of this pair, the aspect of the North America being open, and the aspect of New York being open, is what wakes this pair up. Notice the volatility increase. Why is that? Think about what is happening at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Not only is the New York market opening, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is most often when we start getting our first economic data for the day. 9 a.m. is another popular time. 9:30 is when the equities market opens in this country. 10 a.m. is another popular economic data release time. So you see the volatility reflect those events: economic data, the equities market opening, the New York session beginning. Okay, and you'll see that's when the volatility increases. It's not that suddenly the Australian dollar has increased in volatility, but the relationship between the Aussie and the U.S. dollar, that volatility increases because we're getting economic data during these times. The market is opening during these times. The New York session is active. What happens, by the way, after our last economic, typically our last economic release, if you speak generally about the way the market moves, after 10 o'clock, we usually don't have that much data. Take a look how the volatility decreases. At noon, what happens at noon Eastern Standard Time? Noon is a very important time, other than lunch, which is always important. But what happens at noon? It is 5 p.m. in London. London is the 800-pound gorilla in the forex market. It has the most turnover, the most activity in the forex market. It is the center of the forex universe. At noon, it's 5 p.m. in London, and people are winding down for the day. Notice how after noon Eastern Standard Time, look at that drop-off. So the U.S. market is open, but once it is no longer overlapped with Frankfurt and London, look how we drop off. And it's not just in the Aussie. Take a look at the Euro-US dollar. Look at the drop-off after noon. Let's take a look at the Euro. It's the most popular pair. Okay? Let's take a look at its natural rhythm for the day. Again, Eastern Standard Time, 24-hour market. 7, 8 a.m. is when New York gets started. Okay? 1800 hours is when the Asian session gets started. 2 a.m. is when Frankfurt begins trading for the day. Again, think about what 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is in Frankfurt. It's 8 a.m. Think about what 3 a.m. in New York is in London. It's 8 a.m. So 2 and 3 a.m. is when Europe and UK get active. And you notice how we get a little bit of a increase in volatility? Just take a look at the bands, take a look at the actual movement. Do you see that? 4 a.m. What happens at 4 a.m.? Sure, Frankfurt's open, London's open, but who closes? The Asian session is generally accepted to be done at 4 a.m. So now you have Sydney, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Singapore leaving the party. That's turnover, that's participation, that's calling it a day. That's less activity, right? Fewer people awake, right? Go back to that, who's awake? Who cares about the movement of this pair? Certainly Europe does. UK does to a certain degree, and then the relationship back to the US dollar, certainly the US cares. So we get flat. Why do we get flat after 4 a.m.? Again, Asia's gone. US is not yet awake. So 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., when do things get going? About 8 o'clock. Again, when do all the people start filing into the office here in the US? About 8 o'clock, about 8 a.m. When do we start getting our economic reports? 8:30. When does the stock market open? 9:30. When do we get more economic reports? 10 o'clock. Do you see how we start to increase? And this is the last 1 month, okay, which has been very quiet, if you guys know, for a lot of pairs. Let's take a look at the last 6 months. Take a look at this view here. The rhythm of the market's still the same, but our pip movement ranges have increased, haven't they? But again, you can still see, here's 2 and 3 a.m. 4 a.m., Asia closes. Then we kind of have about 3 hours of boredom as Frankfurt and London wait for the U.S. to gear up. We are waiting on the economic reports. They're waiting on the U.S. equities market. And boom, you see the activity spike during these key hours. You want to talk about the key hours of the day? The most volatile hours of the day. This doesn't mean I want you chasing volatility. You have to be aware of it. You have to be aware of it so you can handle it. But 8, 9, and 10 a.m. are the bread and butter of the day. I used to, for years, be told, I don't get up at 2 o'clock, by the way, to trade forex. If you do, that's fine because, you know, obviously, London and Frankfurt get active, and you can see how once London and Frankfurt join the Asian session, there's a little bit of movement, right? But I like my sleep. I don't know about you guys, but I love to sleep. Okay, I like my normal hours. I don't know how well my family's going to like me getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and walking down to my office here. I trade from home. I have a home office here. It's where I do my work. I close my door, and I do what I got to do. And I don't know how crazy they're going to be with me getting up at 2 a.m. I can't even function at that hour of the day. I'll be honest, I have a hard enough time getting up at 6. 2 and 3 a.m. are not going to be valid trading hours for me, but I used to hear people tell me all the time, oh, you're missing out, oh, you're missing out. And I said, why? You know, if the Euro-US dollar, again, depending on what pairs you're trading, right? If the Euro-US dollar gets volatile around 8, 9, 10 o'clock, I'm getting the economic reports around 8, 9, 10 o'clock, why can't I start getting into my office around 6:37? Now, the thing that I didn't know to ask them back then is what pairs are you trading? Notice again, after noon, how it drops off, how quiet it is during Asia. If you don't have a high risk tolerance, Asia is your best friend. I don't want to necessarily hear that people don't like Asia. You know, I don't necessarily like to trade Asia because I've been trading all day, and I don't want to have to trade through the night as well. I gotta walk away at some point, right? But if you like low volatility, and this is not about when you should be trading, it's understanding the behavior during these trading hours. If you like low volatility, Asia's fantastic. But don't expect the 8, 9, 10 a.m. New York trading hour volatility to be what you're getting during Asia. Understand the expectations depending upon the financial center. So in Sydney, Sydney, Tokyo, and Hong Kong and Singapore are all open. That's the heart of your Asian session, right? But you're not going to get that much volatility. When's it going to wake up? Around 2, 3 a.m. when Europe and the UK join. And then it's really going to get lively when the US joins the party and overlaps with Europe and UK. If you don't like a lot of volatility, you know which hours now to avoid. That's just as important.